Hey everyone, welcome to Bumbling Through Dungeons. My name is Mark, I think. I don't know. I pose that as a question, but it is a fact. My name is Mark. Today we're talking about linking together adventures in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and you can already see my face sort of getting a little sad because this is a topic where I'm going to have some complaints. And normally I like to talk about the good, or at least talk about some of the bad, but then find solutions for them. And this is one where I'm going to be like, well, here are the problems, and here are maybe some solutions. And I don't know if they're actually solutions because I think that there are some issues with or challenges to overcome in linking together the official adventures in 5th edition. But we're going to talk through it today and hopefully come out with a couple ideas for being able to chain them together at your table if that's something that you're interested in. So the reason I'm making this video is that there's one question that I get more than anything. I've seen this in discussions with people that play here in Columbus and find out I play, and we get to talking, and this question comes up. I see it online. I see people chatting about it in my friend groups, some of whom I've played D&D with, some of whom play in other groups. It comes up all the time. And the specific question that led to this video, which is a little more broad, but the specific question is, all right, I have either just run or am currently running Lost Mine of Phandelver, which is the level 1 to 5 introductory adventure that came with the 5th edition starter set. And the question is, what do I do next? And I think there are very few balls that were dropped as hard in 5th edition as this one by Wizards of the Coast. Now, I'm happy to sing the praises of Wizards with a lot of the work that they do. And I think that there's a bunch in 5th edition that they've done that's incredible, and it's helped to grow the audience and find different modes of play for those audiences. But so many people seem to get to the end of Phandelver and they say to themselves, what now? And I get it, because a lot of 1 to 5 adventures are over pretty quickly. If you run some of them as is, like as written in the book, and you're not pulling in different ideas and homebrewing things, it could be over in 5 to 10 sessions. And sometimes, especially if it's your introduction to D&D or 5th edition D&D, you might have a really interesting player character concept that you want to bring to life, and you're starting to bring to life. And really, I mean, there's only so much you can do at levels 1, 2, 3. By about level 3, you're starting to get into some of the more interesting class abilities, but you maybe have not really explored this character, either mechanically or narratively, as much as you would like. So you get to level 5, you finish Phandelver, it's great, you've got these characters, and you want to do something with them. And I get that. It's a very powerful drive. Like, oh my gosh, like we want to keep playing. I get that from most people. If you make it through Phandelver, most of the people I talk to are more than happy to continue going. And they are, especially if they're new players, they're probably super interested in staying with those same characters. So the question is, hey, Mark, what do I do next? What can I take these level 5 characters into that's some other official adventure? And there's no good answer. We're going to talk about some potential answers. There's been a lot written about what you can do. There's other people that have talked about this, but the fact that so many people have tried to create answers for this question means that there isn't one good answer for this question. So there are a lot of people who've bent over backwards to try to help groups go from Phandelver right to something else that's an official book in D&D 5e. And they really did have to bend over backwards because there's a lot of work that needs to happen to sort of splice anything else to it. Some, I think, more than others. And we're going to talk about a few that I think require the least amount of prep. But the least amount of prep in this case is still more prep than I think should have been necessary. I would have loved to see some adventure that starts at level 5 and goes to maybe level 12. They could have followed on the heels of Phandelver and been the most logical jumping off point. I think they missed an opportunity in 5th edition to do that, because I do see so many groups and so many people asking, even if I don't know them personally. I've seen this posted on discussion boards and YouTube and Twitter, and just people trying to figure out what to do next because there isn't a clear answer. So we're going to talk through some potential answers here today, and hopefully one of them works for you. So the answer that I would do, and this is probably the least helpful answer for a lot of people out there, is I would come up with something on my own. I would make something up, and it might tie to Phandelver, it might be nearby. I would probably just homebrew it and start running from 5th level on to some point with my own ideas. And of course, as with most homebrew, it might pull in other ideas from elsewhere here and there, but it would be my overarching campaign. And this is something that, especially, again, if Phandelver was the first thing you ever ran and you're just kind of getting your feet under you and learning the ropes, then this might not be your preferred solution. But I think if you want a completely smooth transition at 5th level from one thing to the next, that it's probably going to be the most organic transition from one campaign to the next, because there isn't an organic transition from one to the next with other things that are out there. Now, the other option is that I'm going to look for some adventures on DM's Guild before this video goes live, because I suspect that somebody out there has made an adventure for 5th level to some other level that is designed explicitly to go after Phandelver. It's too big a gap for that not to exist, for somebody not to have thought about it and then created it and put it up there. So I will try to find one or two of those if they exist. I suspect they exist. And there are adventures, though, that start at level 5 for 5th edition. You can find them on DriveThruRPG. You can find them on the DM's Guild. They might not necessarily be meant for play immediately after Phandelver, but there are a lot of adventures that you can take from one setting, take all of the details of the adventure itself, and just transplant it into a different setting so that it works immediately after Phandelver. And I think that could work. So you could find something that's maybe just a 5th level adventure. Maybe it goes from 5 to 8, maybe it goes from 5 to 10. Those do exist, whether or not they were designed to come immediately thereafter. So again, as I find them, because I know they're out there, I'll link a few down in the description before this video goes live. Although offhand, I haven't found the perfect solution to it. So what are some others? If you want to stay within official materials, so the other fear that you run into, if it's something that somebody else homebrewed, you can't necessarily vouch for the quality of it. And part of the fun of 5th edition, and I get it, part of the fun of D&D is that everybody's played a lot of the same modules. Everybody has the same shared lore and the same history. So when I talk to somebody else who has played Curse of Strahd, we instantly have a 30-minute long conversation that we can have with each other. Whereas if you're playing some obscure thing that you found on the DM's Guild, it might be really fun, but you don't have that. So a lot of people play for that sense of community as well. So they're really interested in staying within the official canon of D&D. So the next thing you can do, and we're working up to actually linking to the other official adventures, so I'm not forgetting that. We are working toward it. But the next thing I think you can do with official, or at least semi-official, I think it's official, D&D materials is delve into some of the material from the Adventurers League. And I didn't mean to make it sound like Adventurers League is not official. It absolutely is, and Wizards supports this. And these are seasons of adventures for people to play who play in Adventurers League play. Now, without going into too much detail about what Adventurers League is, with each published adventure, there's usually a season of Adventurers League modules that comes out. And oftentimes, these Adventurers League modules will happen sort of in the background of the official adventure. So, in Out of the Abyss, you're dealing with the Demon Lord incursion. And in the Adventurers League season that runs concurrent with Out of the Abyss, you're on the surface, you're not in the Underdark, but you're dealing with some of the ramifications of demon lords being back in the world and their influence on surface-dwelling creatures. So you can start to see how some of this material might act as a bridge from one adventure to another. And I think if you're looking for a bridge, rather than trying to just graft one adventure onto another, I think Adventurers League material is where you want to look. So if you are thinking, Out of the Abyss sounds interesting. And I know it's split into two halves, and the second half is roughly levels 7 to 15, or maybe 8 to 15, but somewhere in there. And okay, so now we're at level 5, and I want to try to run that, but I need to get them from 5 to level 7 or 5 to level 8, whatever it might be. At that point, I would probably start to look at that Adventures League season that ran concurrent with Out of the Abyss to see if there are stories or adventures or plot hooks that you can pull in that are going to be appropriate for 5th level adventurers. So this is going to keep it within the same universe. It's going to give you opportunities to create bridges because Adventures League modules are designed to be one-shots. I think even the longest and most complicated of them you could run in a couple sessions. And if a season has like 15 modules, then you could potentially have 25 sessions, but maybe you're only pulling in 3 or 4 of those modules, of the Adventures League modules. So maybe you only have a handful of sessions before you're able to transition into something else. And it might be that you don't find a great bridge, but because they are envisioned because they're created as one-shots, yes, there's a coherent story arc in these Adventures League seasons, but it's a much looser story arc than the official D&D books, like the longer adventures that most players are used to. And so it's going to be comparatively easier to jump in at level 5 and maybe play from level 5 all the way up to level 10 in those Adventures League modules and have that be a campaign, because really they are sort of, even though they're designed as one-shots, a series of one-shots, they form loose story arcs. And so they could absolutely provide a framework for a campaign. So I think Adventures League modules, it's something that will give you a lot of flexibility. They can be very malleable. They can help you transition into one of the larger books, or you could just stay in the Adventures League modules. So like I said, there are seasons that run concurrent with, there's ones that happen concurrent with Horde of the Dragon Queen and Rise of Tiamat, of Storm King's Thunder, of Tomb of Annihilation, of any of the books. So if any of them strikes your fancy and you think to yourself, this might be interesting, but I don't know that I have a great on-ramp into the full adventure, maybe that is your solution. Okay, so you're still sitting here and you're thinking to yourself, Mark, no, this is not what I need. My players want to run, they want to fight Tiamat, they want to fight the Demon Lord incursion, they want to fight a Sararak in the jungles of Chult. I need to find a way to get from this to this other big thing. How do I make it happen? So this is where there's no shortcut necessarily. There's maybe a couple shortcuts, but it's still going to involve a little bit of work. So the first thing that I would say is look for those adventures that have optional, skippable, or at least intro sections that you could summarize very quickly as part of like exposition or backstory, or ones that are explicitly you're able to skip them. So one that I'm thinking of, and there are a few like this, but one that I'm thinking of is Curse of Strahd. Now, it has an introductory module or adventure called the Death House. And the Death House is intended to, it does some nice things. I actually really like the Death House. But it's an introductory adventure to take the players from level 1 to level 3. When they finish the Death House, they come out of the Death House and they are level 3. And then you are into the adventure proper in the land of Barovia, where Curse of Strahd takes place. So if you're level 5 and that's level 3, and that adventure, that Death House adventure, while cool, I actually really like it, it is skippable. You can skip the whole thing and not really have to worry about missing any information that's going to be necessary to play in Curse of Strahd. So you're already pretty close. So you can just skip that and they should be level 3. So now your players are level 5. So a really easy way to do this would be to, say, start Curse of Strahd with those level 5 players and just not level them up for a little bit longer at the beginning and let the adventure catch up to them in terms of difficulty. Now, depending on your comfort level with doing this, you might also take those early encounters for levels 3 and 4 and ramp up the difficulty to make it more appropriate for a level 5 party. So that's another option. And Either way, I think you're going to be able to make it work. And by the time the adventure catches up to them, they might spend a little bit longer at level 5 than you would normally. But if that's a few more sessions at level 5, you just talk to your players beforehand and you say, hey, I have to make sure the adventure catches up to you on difficulty so that this is fun and challenging. And, most players are going to be okay with that. And then you're good to go. So from that point on, and Strahd goes up to level 10. So from levels 5 to 10, the whole back half, and really it's more than the back half of the adventure because it doesn't take too long to get from level 1 to 3. That's only like a couple sessions. So the meat of the adventure is going to be from levels 5 to 10. So you still have all of that in front of you, and you haven't had to do too much work to make the two work together. Strahd is also a nice one because you can start it anywhere. There are adventures that are very setting specific. Phandelver ends in an area of the world that is very, very, very different from Tomb of Annihilation. So you would have to find, and you can't really fudge those settings. Like the Jungle of Chult is a very evocative setting. I don't think you could run Tomb of Annihilation without having the Jungle of Chult. So if you're nowhere near the Jungle of Chult, you got to figure out how to get to the Jungle of Chult. Curse of Strahd, it's a demi-plane, and they get pulled into the demi-plane, and they could be anywhere. So it doesn't matter where they are. You can start that adventure literally anywhere in the world that you want. So that's one that I think lends itself better, not great, but better, to latching onto these level 5 adventures. And I think there are a couple others where you can do similar things. There are early sections of Storm King's Thunder and Princes of the Apocalypse that people have either skipped or at least truncated to the point where you're cutting a lot of material and moving on to the stuff that's going to be for level 3, level 4, level 5. You get into the meat of the plot a little bit more quickly. With these and with others like them, you could take any book and make this work. That's the other answer here, is anything that you want to run, you could make it work. You could take an adventure from another system that isn't Dungeons and Dragons or another edition of the game from 3rd edition or 4th edition or whatever and make it work after Phandelver or anywhere. It's just how much work you're going to have to put into it to make that a reality. And the further removed you get in terms of starting level, in terms of system, in terms of these things, the harder it's going to be for you up front to prepare it. And see, this is where it starts to get a little bit intimidating for especially newer DMs who are saying to themselves, well, okay, narratively, I can see how I can get into Curse of Strahd, but I'm going to have trouble adjusting encounters, or I'm going to have a hard time linking it so that it makes it feel organic. Some of that will come with practice. I would say that if you're open with your group from the start about, hey, this might not be the smoothest transition, but if we want to run this adventure, we can make it happen. Everybody's going to be on board, and ideally the group is working with you to help make it a more realized reality. So when it comes to encounter building and encounter tweaking, there are a lot of tools out there. The DM's guide actually has some nice tools in there for encounter building. I love to use Kobold Fight Club, and you can Google that, Kobold Fight Club, or I'll link it down in the description if I remember to do that. But if you Google it, you'll find it. It's a nice little encounter builder tool that lets you tweak and adjust things to figure out, oh, okay, this encounter might be a medium difficulty for them. Now it's hard, now it's deadly, and then you can sort of adjust based on the skill level and actual level, like level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of your group, and how many of them are in the party. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes to adjust things quickly to make it the level of challenge that you're looking for. So I don't know that there's a shortcut to that. So read through the guides to encounter building in the DM's guide. I think that's a great start. Just playing around on Kobold Fight Club and some of the similar tools that are out there on the internet, I think that can help a lot. And it's not going to be, fortunately, it is just, there's some math involved, there's some division, things like that, but fortunately, it isn't rocket science. So once you learn the formula, it's not a perfect formula for the CR rating and encounter building, but it's a nice general gauge of difficulty that you can then make your own. So if you find that medium encounters are just way too easy, you can ramp that up and do more hard difficulty. Or, if they take a lot of long rests, maybe they have mostly deadly encounters because they're resting after every single fight, that sort of thing. Whereas if they don't have that chance, maybe you have a lot of lower level encounters. So that is an art unto itself, a little bit beyond the purview of this video. But if you're watching this and thinking, oh God, how do I do encounter changes, then hopefully that gets you started in the right direction. So back to the topic at hand, we are grafting Phandelver to other adventures. And before I go any further, I want to say that we're talking about Phandelver a lot because I get this question a lot, and I think it's where a lot of groups jump off from. But this could be anything. This could be any adventure where you stop at a certain level and then you need to get to a different adventure and you need to find ways to create bridges. So do you do that with homebrew? Do you find something on the DM's Guild for that level to take you from level 7 to 9 or 12 to 13 or whatever it might be? Or do you make it up on your own? Or do you look to Adventures League? Or do you find ways to sort of twist an official adventure into something that's going to work for your group? These are the questions. This is the process that I would go through in any situation like that, not just with Phandelver. And I think that you're going to come up with the solution that's going to be best for you. It might be different than the one that I come up with, but these are all potential solutions to that problem, whether it's with Phandelver or something else. So there's a couple other adventures that I want to mention that I think can make this transition a little bit easier. So the Hoard of the Dragon Queen, Rise of Tiamat duo, those are intended to follow from one another. And those, again, go from like level 1 to 7 and level 8 to 15, respectively. And I don't think it's necessary to play Hoard of the Dragon Queen in order to play Rise of Tiamat. So, okay, now you again have something where, all right, if your players are level 5, or maybe you finished something else and they're level 3, and you want to get them up to level 7 or level 8, then you're going to go through the same process of how do I bridge this. Sometimes, in a case like this, I could see a DM. If I wanted to run Rise of Tiamat, here's how I would handle it. If I got to level 5, said, I kind of want to do this dragon arc. We haven't done Dungeons and Dragons enough. I want more dragons. So what I would do is I would take Hoard of the Dragon Queen, which is a somewhat linear adventure, and I would crush it down to like level 5 to 8 or 5 to 7, somewhere in there. So basically, maybe they wouldn't be leveling up as quickly. Maybe some of the material would get tossed out. I would be making those decisions. I'd have to go through the book on a more granular basis to figure out exactly what I would remove and exactly what I would keep and exactly what I would adapt. But I think that's an adventure that you could crunch into a few levels, get you to level 8, and then boom, you're ready for Tiamat. And you've gotten most of the context from Hoard of the Dragon Queen that is going to help you narratively bridge it to Rise of Tiamat. So something like that would be possible. But again, that has you, the DM, going through Hoard of the Dragon Queen and making a lot of editorial decisions about what to keep, what not to keep, and what to change. So that might be more work than you're willing to put in. And it certainly is more work than it would be to just run it as is. So they thought to bridge those two together, one after another. Why they didn't do that with something after Phandelver, I'm not sure. They did it one other time so far, as I record this in 5th edition, and that was with Waterdeep Dragon Heist and Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage. And I will say that, at least in this instance, the two are very unrelated. So they both take place in Waterdeep, and Dungeon of the Mad Mage is mostly underneath Waterdeep, but they aren't terribly related to one another. You might have some similar NPCs, you might have a few clues to stuff that's going on down in Undermountain that you feed your players in the early parts of Dragon Heist, but I ran Dragon Heist, and then I read through most of Mad Mage, and really, they're two very different adventures. The only thing that really links them together closely is the fact that they take place in the same location, and one ends at level 5 and one begins at level 5. So Some groups did that. We decided after we were done with Dragon Heist that we were good with those characters. That was all that we ran with them. So we didn't do Mad Mage. We didn't do anything else either. A few of the characters have actually shown up in one-shots that we've run since then, but that's neither here nor there. But that is that's another time where they tried to bridge two directly together. So, I mean, hell, maybe you want to run Mad Mage. Maybe you want to run a Mega Dungeon, and you could transition from level 5 with Vandelver or anywhere else. And again, hell, if you were running Horde of the Dragon Queen, end at level 7, do you want to run Tiamat? No, maybe not. All right, so you don't run Tiamat. You could take those level 7 characters and you could find a way to make it work with at least Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Some of the others, maybe something like Princes of the Apocalypse or Out of the Abyss. I think Abyss might be a little bit easier because that has sort of two halves as well, and the second half starts at around level 8. So you could run Horde of the Dragon Queen and then transition into Out of the Abyss, or run Vandelver and transition into Dungeon of the Mad Mage. So you can start to see how you can make these work, and you're weaving in and out of them. There is going to be more work with some of them than others, but it's not impossible. And the last adventure that I want to give a plug to, I did a longer review of it here on my channel a while back, and that's Ghosts of Saltmarsh. And Ghosts of Saltmarsh, I wouldn't really even classify it as a campaign. It's more a series of loosely interrelated maritime adventures. Now, there are a few adventures in the book that are designed to come one after another, like A to B to C to D, through this story arc. But those are just 3 of the adventures in the book. And there are a bunch of others, and they're for a variety of different levels. So you could, with a lot of these, if you're not too high level, you could transition it into a C campaign and then start to run stuff that's in the Ghosts of Saltmarsh book. And I think it could be really fun. And I think that would work because those adventures are loose enough. They're loosely connected enough that you don't need to run all of them. You could pick and choose individual ones that you think are interesting and ignore some of the others. And maybe that is your bridge. Maybe you have a C adventure that takes you 2 or 3 sessions, and that's from Ghosts of Saltmarsh, and it takes you to another area of the world, and that's where you pick up with something else. Maybe that's how you get to Chult, something along those lines. So I'm starting to ramble a little bit. Hopefully it doesn't seem too random, but I think that hopefully in listening to me sort of brainstorm through all of these different ideas, many of which I've thought of before, so it's not a true brainstorm. I'm not coming up with it right here on the spot, but it mirrors the process that you would be able to go through to try to figure out exactly how you're going to get from point A to point B with characters and running different types of adventures. And the last interesting book that is good for sort of plug and play adventures in 5th edition is the Tales from the Yawning Portal, which that really just updates a lot of older classic modules from older editions of D&D and brings them into 5th edition. And it, again, much like the Saltmarsh book, it doesn't really have an overarching plot through all of them, but they're basically standalone adventures for certain levels, and it might be one level or it might be a level range, I think, for a couple of them. And so you might be able to take 5th level characters into one of those adventures, or maybe you need to get them to level 7 and then you take them into one of the Tales from the Yawning Portal. So those are time-tested adventures and dungeons, so I don't think you can go wrong with those. And the other nice thing is that a lot of them will work. If it's a castle or a tomb or whatever, you can put that anywhere in your world. It doesn't have to be in the set location that the book says or that the lore of the world says. So a lot of these you can plug and play into your setting, into your campaign in ways that are going to work for you. So that's another tool for your toolbox. Hopefully I'm not overwhelming you with different options, but I think the more options you have, at least once you narrow in on a few that you think are interesting, the better decision you're going to be able to make for what's going to be best for your group. So that's really all I have. This video felt a little bit like idea soup, but I think it reflects what I talked about at the beginning, that there isn't one great answer to the question. of what do you do after Phandelver? And I think that that question and the lack of a clear answer gives way to the type of discussion that's good to have about how do you get from point A to point B, level such and such to level such and such, within a game world in a way that feels organic, in a way that feels smooth. How do you make those transitions? Sometimes there aren't going to be perfect answers, but there are answers. And finding the one that's going to be best for you can be a challenge, but can also be rewarding once you find what that is. So, if you're running Phandelver, if you're running something else, if you're worried about transitioning to something else, this had to have given you at least a couple new ideas. I do hope one of them works well for you. If you're running Phandelver and you are transitioning into something else, I'd love to hear what you did and how it went for your group. So you can let me know here in the comments on YouTube. You can always find me on Twitter at BT Dungeons. But until the next video, take care.